Hello, Brick 2. Let's return back again to David Copperfield, and we are going to start with chapter 12, Bad News Abroad and At Home. This chapter starts with a nice surprise. But let me return back from the beginning. Mr. Dick went to visit David. He had already come because he wanted to know what was going on between Dr. Strong and his wife. David thought that Mr. Dick wouldn't do anything, but Mr. Dick told him no one knew how to solve that problem. Maybe I could do what everyone had failed to do. This is exactly what Mr. Dick had done. Mr. Dick one day came with Mrs. Strong, and she was crying in front of her husband and David. She said that she was going down on her knees and told everyone that she married Dr. Strong not because his money, but because that she loved him. She also told Dr. Strong that Mr. Dick told her that everyone thinks that she loved her cousin, and especially Dr. Strong, her husband, but she said that she never loved him because in fact they are different and she disliked him. It's true that they grow up together when they were young, and it's true that she loved him when she was a child, but that kind of love cannot never grow up. Dr. Strong was very happy with what had happened, and they returned back to each other again, and this is because of Mr. Dick. Point number 2, news about Emily. We come to know one day that David was passing by Steerforth's house when the servant invited him to come inside. There he found Mrs. Steerforth and Rosa Dirtle. Miss Dirtle asked Littimer, Steerforth's servant, to tell him what had happened. He said that Mr. Steerforth and Emily left for Europe and traveled through many countries. Their love lasted a long time, and they were very happy. But the lady, Emily, often walked down to the sea and spoke to the children there. It seemed that she was thinking about her own childhood. Steerforth didn't like that. He wanted her to forget about her past. They argued, and he left her in Italy. He also told Littimer that he would not marry her. Of course, Miss Dirtle was very happy, and as she said from the beginning, and expected that Steerforth wouldn't marry Emily at all. In this chapter, we are going to find out about the mystery of the man who was following Aunt Betsy. We had seen that man before 2 times. One time when Mr. Dick told David that there was a man following Aunt Betsy and came to her house, and she gave him money and then left. Another time when David went with Aunt Betsy to apply for his job at Mr. Spinlow, he saw that man again, and he left only when she gave him money. Now we are going to find out who was that man. It was her husband who left her and traveled to India. She told him that she was once married and that was her husband. He is a dirty old man now and comes back to her for money every so often. She gave him all she can, but she will never get rid of him. So she asked David not to open that subject anymore. A year passed. Dora and David are still married, but Dora was getting weaker. She became weak, just the same as her dog exactly, who was also getting weak. David, of course, didn't leave her, so he asked the doctors to come and check her, but the doctor said, wait a few days more. Maybe she would get better. But unfortunately, she was not getting better. She was getting weaker. She was not able to go downstairs. David had to hold her to take her upstairs or downstairs. It seemed that Dora was about to die. In chapter 13, David started the chapter with receiving 2 letters from the Make-A-Whipper's family. The first letter came directly from Mr. Make-A-Whipper to David. He asked him that he will come to London next week and he will wait for him in front of the debtor's prison. He wanted to talk with him. The second letter came to David indirectly through Troublous. She sent the letter to Troublous and she asked him to meet Mr. Make-A-Whipper. She was very upset with him, but she didn't want David or Troublous to tell him anything about her letter. It was confusing. We didn't know what Mr. Make-A-Whipper wanted them for. When they met Mr. Make-A-Whipper, it was the first time for him to be sad. We are always used to seeing Mr. Make-A-Whipper happy, but that time he was not happy. David invited him to his aunt's house, and there he came with strange actions when they mentioned the name Uriah Heep in front of him. He threw things to the ground and shouted, "I will kill that snake, Heep," and ran out of the house. But shortly afterwards, they received another letter from him where he apologized for his actions and he asked them to come to Canterbury where they will find out the truth behind everything. It seemed that there was a big mystery. Meanwhile, David saw Martha. Martha was a friend to Emily, and Emily helped her before when they were together in Yarmouth, working together for Mr. Omer, and gave her money because she wanted to travel back to London. David found Martha and asked her to help him to find Emily, and it seemed that Martha was successful to find her. Martha found Emily and she took her to her house and then went to bring David and send a letter to Mr. Biggity to come quickly to London. When David went with Martha to her house to see Emily, he found Rosa Dartle there and she was talking to Emily. He didn't want to enter and he started to listen from outside to what they were saying together. Rosa Dartle said that she wanted to see what kind of low life was Emily. She was the worst of women to come between a gentleman and his mother, and she was sure that she would tell everyone how bad she was. Emily replied and said that she was tricked by Steerforth, and she discovered that when he told her that he was not going to marry her. Of course, Miss Dartle said, he will not marry you. You are such a poor girl. After the discussion ended between the two of them, and Mr. Biggity returned to London and found his Emily, he comes to David on the next morning to tell him Emily's story. After Emily left Steeforth, she went to the beach and fell down and fainted. There, a poor fisherman's wife found her and looked after her for many days. She got to know the children there and soon wanted to leave for England. Soon after she arrived in London, Martha found her and contacted us. At the same time, we come to know that Ham is still in love with Emily, because when he saw David, he told him, "Please tell Emily that I am happy she is back and I forgive her. I still love her and I will love no one else but her for the rest of my days." But do you think that Emily would love him? Would return back to him? We don't know. Comes to the fourth point, which is the most important point in our story, the story of Uriah Heep. Mr. Micawber met David and Trudless and of course Aunt Betsy at Canterbury. They went together to Mr. Wakefield's house, where they found Uriah Heep. When Uriah Heep saw Mr. Micawber, he asked him to leave, but he refused and said that he wouldn't leave until he read this letter about Uriah. And he started to read the letter. Mr. Micawber said, "I wish to say three things about that man, Uriah Heep. First, I have collected all this information while I was a clerk here at Wakefield, and I have found that Heep has cheated Mr. Wakefield. This is number one. Number two, he told Mr. Wakefield, that good man, that he owed money to everyone. He cheated on Mr. Wakefield. Number three, Heep has forged Mr. Wakefield's signature on many documents, which means that he signed it instead of Mr. Wakefield. And by this way, he took all Mr. Wakefield's business and money." Uriah Heep was furious, very angry. He was even rude to his mother. When his mother asked him to say sorry to everyone, he said, "Shut up, mother. I will make life black for all of you. I know all about your husband, Miss Trotwood, and I know all about your poor childhood, Mr. Copperfield. Micawber, you will never work again." Of course, Trudless collected all these documents, and he told Uriah Heep that if he left that house immediately, he wouldn't tell the police about what he did. So Uriah accepted that and he left. Meanwhile, Trudless told Aunt Betsy that after searching these documents, he found out a way that he could return back all her money. It was about £5,000. And at the same time, Aunt Betsy, of course, was happy to have her money back, and she would help the Micawber's family, because without Mr. Micawber, she wouldn't take her money back. In chapter 14, we have 4 deaths. Let's start with number 1, Dora. Dora was getting weaker and weaker, and before she died, she asked David for one request. She wanted to see Agnes. She wanted to tell her something. The strangest thing happened at her death, which is Agnes was with her upstairs and David was sitting downstairs with her dog. Suddenly, he found her dog dead. At the same time, Agnes came downstairs and told him that Dora was dead. Of course, David was very sad. He didn't know what to do, and he thought that the best thing he could do is that he should leave London, he should leave England, he should travel abroad, he should stay away from everyone. Aunt Betsy, as we said in chapter 13, would help the Make-A-Whipper family to start a new life. So she took the IOU. IOU, means I owe you money. These are documents which the person who has to pay money for someone should write a letter, should write a document which proves that he owes money to someone. So Uriah Heep decided that he would give all these documents to the police because he wanted to see Mr. Make-A-Whipper in prison. So Aunt Betsy decided to pay the money so that he wouldn't go to prison again. Now David, before he decided to travel, he wanted to tell Emily about the letter or the message from Ham. So he sent a letter to Mr. Biggity, and he received in return a letter from Emily. The letter said that I thank you and pray for you. Perhaps after I die, I will meet you again as a little child and love you always. It seemed from the letter that Emily is not ready yet to love Ham anymore. David took that message from Emily and decided to go to Yarmouth to give it to Ham. But unfortunately that day there was a big storm, and David had to stay in an inn beside the coast, where someone knocked on him and said that there was a ship in that storm and she was going down. So David went outside to see what was happening. Suddenly he saw Ham on the beach. He was tied to a long piece of rope and was going towards the sea. He tried to get near him, but he shouted, "If my time is come, it has come. I'm going off to help the man on the ship." Ham was a brave man. He saw a man on that ship. He was drowning and he wanted to save him. He didn't care about if he is going to die or not. The most important thing for Ham is that he is going to save that man. This is point number 4. Fate gathered Steerforth and Ham, because the man who was on that ship was Steerforth. Ham was going to save Steerforth. Do you think that he is going to save him? Do you think that Ham thinks that Steerforth deserves life? David saw Ham swim through rough waves. He saw him go in and out of water. Finally, there was one last wave which threw him powerfully onto the shore. He was dead, and the men on the beach brought the other man from the ship. He was too dead. David found out that the other man was Steerforth, and he had to do a very important and a very difficult mission. He had to tell Mrs. Steerforth that her son was dead. So he went back to London, and he went directly to Mrs. Steerforth's house. David found Mrs. Steerforth and Miss Dirtle, and the moment he came inside, Mrs. Steerforth knew that her son was dead. Even before David could continue what he was going to say, she told him that, "I know my son is dead." But the reaction of Miss Dirtle was so weird. She told Mrs. Steerforth, "Your son is now dead, you proud woman." She also told her that Steerforth loved me for a while, and I loved him. I loved him more than you, but you let him do anything he wanted. You spoiled that boy. She even told him, "Look at this scare he gave me. He was a selfish boy and you made him selfish, but I loved him. And a curse on you, Mr. Copperfield, for coming here today. Go!" This is the end of our session today. See you soon. Bye.